The morning my daughter-in-law told me I wasn't welcome at my own Christmas table, I was still standing there in my apron. I had been awake since 5:30 that morning. The turkey was already roasting in the oven. The mushroom sauce sat cooling on the counter, the same counter I had wiped down almost every day for the last 30 years. She looked at me with a calm expression, cold as winter, and said, "We didn't really plan this as your thing, Barbara. Maybe you'd feel more comfortable upstairs." That kitchen was mine. The house was mine. My name had been on the deed since 1994. I stood there with a dish towel in my hands, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because I was shocked. Deep down, I think I had known this moment was coming for a long time. I just didn't want to face it. But I should start from the beginning because this story didn't really begin at Christmas. It started on a quiet Wednesday in January, about a year before that morning. My son called me from the parking lot of his apartment building and asked if he and his wife could stay with me for a little while. My son's name is Travis. He's 35 years old. He has the same gray-blue eyes my late husband Gary had, the exact shade I fell in love with when I was 21 years old, and Gary sat down beside me at a community choir rehearsal in Michigan. Travis was born a year into our marriage. He was the kind of child who made being a parent feel like a gift instead of a responsibility. He was curious, gentle, and thoughtful in an old-fashioned way. The kind of kid who would pull out a chair for you at the dinner table and truly mean it. Gary passed away 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. He was diagnosed in October and gone by February. Those 4 months were both the longest and the shortest months of my life. After Gary died, I stayed in our house. The same house we bought together when Travis was 3 years old. The house Gary and his brother spent an entire summer renovating. The house where every wall held a memory. My neighbors asked if I planned to downsize. My sister asked if I wanted to move closer to her in Pittsburgh. I told them both no. I wasn't ready to leave. And to be honest, I still don't know if I ever will be. So when Travis called me that Wednesday in January and said things had gotten financially tight, his contract job had ended unexpectedly, and his wife Cassie had just quit her job to start her own business that was still getting off the ground, I said yes before he even finished explaining. "Just until we stabilize," he said. "Maybe 2 or 3 months. We'll help with groceries. We'll help around the house. It won't be a burden, Mom, I promise." I believed him. He was my son. Of course I believed him. And I want to be fair to Cassie because I think fairness matters, even when it's difficult. When she and Travis first started dating, I actually liked her. She was smart, quick-witted, and had a very direct way of speaking that I admired. She didn't play those little social games some people do, where they say one thing but mean another. Cassie said exactly what she thought. I respected that. When Travis told me he was going to propose to her, I was happy for him. 3 years ago, they got married at a small ceremony at a vineyard near Shoshone Falls by the lake. I danced at the reception until my feet were aching, and every bit of the joy I felt that day was real. But I've learned something in 52 years of living. People can seem like one thing in one situation and become something very different when life changes. And life did change. They moved in on a Saturday in late January. They arrived with a rented van, 2 cats, and more boxes than I had expected. I had prepared the largest guest bedroom for them, the one with the east-facing window and the attached bathroom that Gary always jokingly called the suite. I washed the curtains. I put fresh flowers on the dresser. I folded extra towels and laid them neatly at the end of the bed. I wanted them to feel welcome. I wanted it to feel like family because that's what it was supposed to be. For the first few weeks, things were fine. Quiet, but fine. Travis would make coffee in the mornings, and the two of us would sit together at the kitchen table before Cassie woke up. Those moments reminded me of when he was a teenager, and we'd share slow weekend mornings before the day got busy. Cassie usually came downstairs around 8 or 9, and we'd all eat breakfast together. She was working on her new business, some kind of online consulting for small retail brands. She set up her laptop at the dining room table and worked there through the afternoon. At first, everything felt manageable. I kept telling myself, this is going to work out. The first change was so small I almost didn't notice it. One morning in early March, I came downstairs and saw that the throw pillows on my living room sofa had been rearranged. I know that might sound like a minor thing, but those pillows had been placed the same way for years. Gary had bought two of them at a little market during a trip we took for our 24th anniversary. I had sewn two others myself from fabric I bought at a small shop in downtown Michigan that closed long ago. They had always sat exactly where I liked them. Now they were stacked differently. Two of them had even been moved over to the armchair in the corner. I didn't say anything. I simply moved them back. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. About 3 weeks later, I noticed something else. The small watercolor painting I kept in the hallway was gone. It was a simple spring scene a friend had painted for me and given me the year after Gary passed away. In its place was a large framed print I had never seen before. It was abstract, mostly gray with dusty purple shapes. Honestly, it wasn't my taste at all. I found the watercolor leaning face down against the wall inside the coat closet. I walked upstairs and knocked on Travis and Cassie's bedroom door. Travis answered. He looked tired. "The painting in the hallway," I said. "My friend Cecilia painted that for me. It means a lot to me. I'd like it put back." He shifted a little and looked uncomfortable. "Cassie thought the hallway felt a bit dark," he explained. "She picked up that print at a pop-up shop. She's been trying to, you know, make the place feel a little more like home." I noticed the word he used. Home, as if it hadn't already been my home. "Travis," I said calmly, keeping my voice steady. "I understand that she wants to feel comfortable here, but this is my house and that painting matters to me. Please put it back." He nodded and said he would. The print stayed on the wall for another 3 days before Cecilia's watercolor quietly returned to its spot. I didn't argue about it. I didn't make a scene. I told myself we would eventually find our rhythm. Living together takes time. But there was no rhythm. There was only escalation. By May, Cassie had reorganized my kitchen cupboards. One morning I went downstairs to make my usual tea and couldn't find my favorite mug. It was a big handmade ceramic mug Travis had made for me during a pottery class when he was 11 years old. I finally found it shoved in the back of a high shelf I could barely reach, hidden behind a set of matching white mugs Cassie had bought and placed neatly in front. When I asked her about it, she said, "It's just more functional this way. The matching set looks cleaner. Yours is a little uneven, and it was taking up a lot of space." I looked at her for a moment before answering. "My son made that mug when he was 11, I said. "It belongs at the front of the cupboard." She smiled in that polite way people do when they think you're overreacting but don't want to say it out loud. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you prefer." Then in June, she announced that her business had grown enough that she needed a proper workspace. She asked if she could use my sewing room. It was a small room just off the main hallway. I had set it up after Gary died. It was where I worked on quilts, did small alterations, and kept my hands busy during those long, quiet years. There was a long work table, a good lamp, and shelves filled with fabric organized by color. In the corner stood my grandmother's old sewing cabinet. I said no. It was the first time I had given a direct answer like that, and I could tell from Cassie's face that she wasn't used to hearing it. "I completely understand," she said with a pleasant smile. "No problem at all." 2 days later, I walked into the room and found two of her computer monitors set up on my work table. My fabric had been moved to the floor in stacked bins. My grandmother's cabinet had been pushed aside to make room for an ergonomic office chair. I went to Travis. "She's under a lot of pressure with the business right now," he said. He looked genuinely torn, and I tried to give him credit for that. "It's just temporary." "That's my sewing room," I said. "We already talked about this." I said no. "I know," he replied quietly. "I'll talk to her." He did talk to her. She apologized. But her monitors stayed on my work table for another 5 weeks. I'm telling you all this not to list every little complaint. I'm telling you because I want you to understand how these things happen. Things like this never happen all at once. If someone moved into your home and, on the very first day, started rearranging your belongings and claiming your rooms as their own, you would react right away. Anyone would. But that's not how it usually happens. Instead, it unfolds slowly, one small shift at a time. Each little moment feels too minor to turn into an argument. It doesn't seem worth the confrontation. And before you realize what's happening, you're standing in your own kitchen feeling like a guest in someone else's house. By August, 6 months into what was supposed to be a 2 or 3 month stay, two things had become clear to me. First, they had no real intention of leaving. Their financial situation had supposedly improved. Travis had picked up a new contract job, yet there was no talk about looking for apartments. No conversations about timelines. No mention at all of the arrangement we had originally agreed on. Second, Cassie had started acting less like a guest and more like the person in charge of the house. She bought a new rug for the kitchen without asking me. She swapped out the hand soap dispensers in the main bathroom for a set she liked better. She even spoke with my neighbor John about the fence between our yards as if she were the homeowner. Then she began commenting on the layout of the living room, wondering aloud if the furniture might look better rearranged. And Travis, my gentle, gray-eyed boy who used to pull out chairs for people, said very little. When he did speak, it sounded like a man trying to keep the peace, not like someone who truly understood what was happening. One evening in September after dinner, I sat alone at the kitchen table and wrote a letter to Gary. I do that sometimes when things feel heavy. I told him what had been going on in the house. I told him I wasn't sure what I should do. I told him how much I missed having someone beside me who remembered that this was our home. Afterward, I folded the letter and set it aside. Then I made myself a cup of tea in the ceramic mug Travis had made for me when he was a boy. And that's when I started thinking clearly. Because I realized something important. I had been waiting for permission to exist in my own home. I had been soft about everything. I kept phrasing things like requests. I used words like I'd prefer, or if you don't mind, or when you get a chance. But those kinds of phrases don't create boundaries. They only sound like wishes. And wishes, I was starting to understand, are very easy to ignore. So in October, I sat down with both of them at the kitchen table. My kitchen table, the one Gary and I bought at an estate sale back in 1996. The same table that still has a long scratch on the left corner from when Travis dragged his hockey bag across it when he was 14. I took out a piece of paper where I had written everything down. I love you both, I told them. And I was happy to help when you needed it. But we need to agree on a few things. Then I went through my list. I told them the sewing room belonged to me and would not be used as an office anymore. I explained that any changes to the house, any purchases that affected the appearance or arrangement of the rooms, needed to be discussed with me first. And I reminded them that this arrangement had originally been meant to last 2 or 3 months. I asked them to start looking for apartments and to give me a move-out date by the end of the month. Cassie sat there with her hands folded neatly on the table while I spoke. She nodded at the right moments. "Of course, Barbara," she said calmly. "We truly appreciate everything you've done for us." She was composed, polite, perfectly pleasant. Travis looked relieved, as if a conversation he had been quietly dreading had gone better than expected. But in reality, nothing changed. The monitors did eventually disappear from the sewing room, at least. But there was still no apartment search. No move-out date. And then, during the first week of December, Cassie told me something. She didn't ask. She told me. "I'm planning a Christmas gathering," she said. "I thought it would be nice to have people over. My sister, her husband, and a couple of friends from my business network. Just something low-key." December 23rd. "That sounds lovely," I replied. "Just let me know who's coming so I can plan the food." She tilted her head slightly. "Oh," she said. "I was planning to handle all of that. You don't need to worry about a thing." I looked straight at her. "It's my house, Cassie. I'll need to be involved in any gathering that happens here." "Of course," Cassie replied. I just meant I wanted to take some of the pressure off you. I'll tell you what happened on December 23rd in a moment, but first you need to understand what happened the day before, on December 22nd. That part matters. That morning, I came downstairs and immediately saw that the dining room had been rearranged. My dining chairs, 8 dark oak ones that I'd collected slowly over more than 20 years, had been pushed aside and mixed with 6 folding chairs that had appeared from somewhere. I had bought those chairs one by one because I loved them. They reminded me of the kind of permanence that comes from careful choices. Now, the whole table had been dragged to the center of the room to make space for all 14 chairs. The sideboard, where I kept Gary's father's china, had been moved across the room against the far wall. And on top of it, neatly lined up, sat a row of tall red pillar candles surrounded by some kind of minimalist arrangement of branches and berries. It looked like something you'd see in a boutique home decor store. My own centerpiece, the one I made every Christmas, was sitting on the floor beside the sideboard. It was a simple arrangement of pine branches and pine cones with the small ceramic deer Gary had given me the very first Christmas after we got married. Now it sat on a piece of newspaper like something waiting to be thrown away. I stood in the doorway of my dining room for a long moment. Then I walked over, picked up my centerpiece, and placed it carefully back in the center of the table. I moved the red candles over to the sideboard and then went into the kitchen to make my coffee. Cassie came downstairs around 9. She walked into the dining room. A moment later, she came back out and stood in the kitchen doorway. "I had that arranged a specific way," she said. "I know," I replied calmly. "And I changed it. My ceramic deer go on the table at Christmas. They always have." She pressed her lips together and didn't say anything else. After a second, she turned and went back upstairs. About an hour later, Travis came looking for me. He looked exhausted, the same worn-out expression he'd been carrying for months. The kind of tired that comes from standing between two people you love and not knowing how to stop doing it. "Mom," he began. "Travis," I said gently, "I'm not having this conversation. Tomorrow is my Christmas gathering, too. In my house, my centerpiece stays." He nodded and didn't argue. It wasn't much, but I took it as something. The guests arrived the next evening around 7. Cassie's sister, Sam, came first. I had met her twice before, and she had always been perfectly pleasant. Then Sam's husband, Jeff, who shook my hand warmly and asked how I'd been doing with what sounded like genuine concern. After them came 2 women I had never met before, friends or business contacts of Cassie's. They were young, well-dressed, and perfectly polite in that surface-level way people are at a gathering where they don't know everyone. I had been awake since 5:30 that morning. I had roasted a turkey. I had baked 2 different pies. I made the mushroom sauce from scratch the way my grandmother taught me. I polished the good glasses and set the table with the placemats I embroidered myself. I even brought out the walnut-handled cutlery Gary and I had received as a wedding gift. I was still wearing my apron when Cassie came into the kitchen just before the guests arrived. She looked at me, at the apron, the oven mitts, the reading glasses pushed up on top of my head, and something crossed her face that she didn't quite manage to hide. "We didn't really plan this as your thing, Barbara," she said. Her voice was calm and even, like she was simply explaining a small detail. "I thought you might want to relax tonight. Maybe have a quiet evening upstairs." And there it was. In the house I had owned since 1994. At the table I'd set every Christmas for 30 years. After 3.5 hours of cooking, she looked at me and suggested I might be more comfortable upstairs. I want to explain what I felt in that moment because it matters. It wasn't the kind of hot anger you might expect, the kind that makes you slam something down and raise your voice. What I felt was colder than that, clearer. It felt like a door quietly closing. And on the other side of that door were all the excuses I had made. Every conversation I had softened. Every time I had said I'd prefer instead of saying, "This is not negotiable." I slowly untied my apron and took it off. I folded my apron neatly and placed it on the counter. Then I walked out of the kitchen, but I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I stepped into the dining room where the guests had just started settling in. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table. My chair. The same chair I had sat in every Christmas dinner since Gary passed away. The same chair I had sat in before that, back when Gary sat at the other end of the table. And I sat down. Cassie appeared in the doorway. Her expression was controlled, but I could see the tension in her jaw. "Sam," I said warmly, turning toward Cassie's sister. "It's so nice to see you again. Jeff, how is the renovation at your place going? Travis mentioned you were redoing the basement." Jeff immediately relaxed. "Oh, it's finally finished," he said with a laugh. What a process that was. "Barbara, do you know how long drywall takes to—" And just like that, the conversation moved forward. The way conversations do when someone gently redirects them. Sam began telling a story about their contractor. One of Cassie's colleagues leaned forward and asked about the mushroom sauce because, as she put it smelled incredible. I answered every question. I laughed where it felt natural. I kept the conversation warm and steady. And I did not look at Cassie standing in the doorway until she eventually walked over and quietly took her own seat. Dinner was served. My turkey, my mushroom sauce, my pies. And I sat at the head of my table. Later, after the guests had gone home and the evening wound down, I washed the dishes myself. It was my kitchen, after all. And honestly, I've always found washing up after a good meal to be a peaceful, almost meditative kind of task. When everything was clean, I went into the living room and sat down. Travis came in a moment later and took the chair across from me. Cassie stayed in the dining room. I could hear her moving things around, probably rearranging something again. "Mom," Travis began. He stopped, then tried again. "I didn't know she said that to you." "I know," I said gently. "I'm sorry." "Travis," I said, "I need you to hear something. And I mean really hear it, not just smooth it over." He nodded quietly. "This is my home," I continued. "I have tried very hard to be patient and kind. I've done my best to make space for both of you here. But I can't keep doing that if the space I create is being filled with disregard." I paused. "I can't live like that in my own house." He sat silently for a long time. Outside, a car drove past slowly and faint Christmas music drifted through the window. "I know we've stayed too long," he finally said. He rubbed his hands together and looked down for a moment. "I think I've been avoiding it," he admitted. "Because, I don't know. It felt easier to stay." "Easier than what?" I asked. "Easier than figuring out what Cassie and I actually need to figure out." I looked at my son then, and in that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully allowed myself to see before. The tension between Travis and Cassie wasn't only about my house. There were things inside their marriage that hadn't been resolved, and staying in my home had given them a way to postpone dealing with those things. My house, my patience, my cooking, my constant presence. All of it had become something they could circle around instead of turning toward each other. And that wasn't something I could fix. It also wasn't something I should have to hold together for them. "I love you," I told him quietly. "I will always love you. But I need both of you to find your own place by February 21st. I let the words sit for a moment. "That gives you 5 weeks. I'll help however I can. I'll look at listings with you. If money is tight, I'll even help with the first and last month's rent." I met his eyes. "But February 21st is the date." He nodded. He didn't argue. And in a small, quiet way, he almost looked relieved. They moved out on January 29th, 3 weeks ahead of the deadline. I don't know exactly what conversations Travis and Cassie had during those 5 weeks, and I didn't ask. They found a 2-bedroom apartment about 25 minutes away, in a neighborhood with a nice coffee shop on the corner and a park nearby. When they drove away with the rented van, again for the second time in less than 2 years, I stood on my front porch in my winter coat and watched until they turned the corner. Then I went back inside. I hung Cecilia's watercolor painting in the hallway again. exactly where it had always been. I moved my ceramic mug to the front of the cupboard where it belonged. Then I opened the door to my sewing room. I stood there quietly for a moment, breathing in the familiar smell of fabric and old wood, and only then did I realize how much I had missed it. I moved my grandmother's sewing cabinet back into its place. Then I sorted all my fabric back onto the shelves, organizing it again by color the way I always had. After that, I sat down at my work table and began working on a quilt I had been planning since the summer. Green and cream fabric in a pattern called Flying Birds. I had made that pattern once when I was a young woman, and for years I had meant to make another one. It took most of that first evening, my first evening truly back to myself, just to cut the pieces and organize everything. By the time I finished, it was past 10 o'clock, which is late for me. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea in the ceramic mug Travis had made years ago. Then I sat quietly in the kitchen. My house, my quiet, my mug. Now Travis calls me 3 times a week, and the truth is, we talk longer than we used to. Without that strange tension that had built up between us when they were living here, there's more space for our conversations, to be honest. Last week he told me that he and Cassie have started seeing a counselor together. I think that takes a certain kind of courage, and I hope it helps them. I didn't ask many questions. That's their life to work through. Cassie sent me a text message in February. It was short. She said she knew things had been difficult and that she was sorry for the part she played in it. I thanked her. And I meant it. I truly hope she figures out what she needs. I just know now that she can't figure it out in my house. My sister came to visit in March. We sat at my dining room table with the walnut-handled cutlery, drinking the black tea she likes, and eating banana loaf that I baked from our mother's recipe. We talked for nearly 3 hours. At one point, she picked up one of the embroidered placemats and looked at it closely. "You made these, didn't you?" she asked. "Back in the 90s?" "Yes," I said. "In 1997. That winter when Gary's mother was ill. I needed something to keep my hands busy in the evenings." She set it down and smiled. "You keep everything," she said. Not critically, just stating a fact. "I keep the things that matter," I told her. The Flying Birds quilt is almost finished now. Most evenings I sit at my work table beneath my good lamp in the sewing room, that is once again mine, and I stitch a little more of it together. When it's finished, I think I might give it to Travis and Cassie. Not as an apology, and not as some kind of message, just as a quilt made carefully with patient hands, offered with genuine hope for their future. But it will be made in my sewing room, in my house, on my time. And I've learned that isn't a small thing, that is everything. If there's one thing I want to leave with you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever version of this story you might recognize in your own life, it's this. The moment someone starts redefining the boundaries of your home without speaking up isn't the moment they take something from you. That moment usually comes earlier, and it's always smaller than you expect. It might be a pillow moved out of place, a painting quietly taken down, a decision made without asking. If you let those small moments pass in silence because you love someone, or because you want to keep the peace, or because each individual thing seems too small to argue about, all that silence eventually adds up. And one day, that silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say, "This is my home, and this part is not negotiable." You can say it kindly. You can say it calmly. You can say it without anger. But you should say it clearly. Love does not require you to disappear. Being generous is not the same as surrendering yourself. Protecting the life you've built, the rooms, the objects, the routines, the quiet, is not selfish. It's simply the dignity of living as a full person instead of becoming a convenience for someone else's comfort. Set your boundaries early. Speak them plainly. You don't have to be harsh, you don't have to be rigid, but you do need to be clear. Because the people who truly love you will respect a clear boundary, and the people who don't respect it are showing you something important. Your home is not just an address, it is the shape of your life, and it deserves to be cared for accordingly.